I remember the exact moment my family tried to erase my future. It was a Tuesday morning in October. I'd spent 8 months studying in our freezing basement, the space heater groaning more than it warmed. When I finally logged into the College Board portal and saw that perfect 1600 on my screen, I didn't scream or jump for joy. I just printed the official report, calm as could be, and carried it upstairs. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and my brother Connor's vanilla protein powder. My mother Brenda stood at the counter, sorting mail. My father, David, was at the table, scrolling on his tablet, the soft swipe of his finger the only sound. I slid the paper next to my mother's coffee mug. She glanced down at the bold text, her eyes narrowing. The skin around her mouth tightened into a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. "Don't be ridiculous, Ellie," she murmured, her fingers loosening. The paper drifted into the stainless steel trash can, landing on damp coffee grounds. "Who did you pay?" My father didn't even look up. He just turned another digital page. Connor, my older brother, the legacy athlete, leaned against the refrigerator. He'd spent 3 months parading his 1350 SAT score around the house like an Olympic medal, demanding applause at every family dinner. Now he took a slow sip of his shake, smirked, and called me a fraud. I just stood there, looking at the trash can. I didn't defend myself. Protest is a waste of oxygen when the jury has already written the verdict. They needed me to be a cheater. They needed my success to be a fabrication. At the time, I thought it was just the usual routine. The golden child gets the spotlight, the shadow stays in the dark. I thought their cruelty was just habit. I was wrong. It wasn't about pride. It was a calculated first strike. Behind their smirks and discarded papers lay a hidden legal document filed in a county annex building, and a ticking clock counting down to my brother's 19th birthday. They weren't just insulting me. They were protecting an investment. And I was about to find out exactly how much my failure was worth to them. To survive the Mason household, you had to master the art of being invisible. Connor occupied all the available oxygen. If he scored a goal, we ate steak. If he failed a geometry quiz, the house went quiet, and doors closed gently. He was the center of gravity, and I was just the background static. But my late grandfather saw through the static. He was a meticulous estate lawyer, a man who spent his life navigating the spaces between what people claimed and what the paperwork proved. I remember sitting in his oak-paneled study when I was 12. The room always smelled of dried ink and peppermint tobacco. He was reviewing a thick stack of real estate contracts, running a silver pen down columns of numbers. He looked up over his wire-rimmed reading glasses. He tapped the heavy parchment paper. "Ellie," he told me, his voice a steady rumble, "people will always lie with their mouths. They will tell you what makes them look good, or what makes you look small. But they can never hide their math. The numbers are the bones. Trust the systems." That memory became my armor. I stopped listening to the words my parents used and started watching their actions as data points. When I began preparing for the SAT, I treated the exam like a complex logistics manifest. I needed a clear schedule, adequate resources, and uninterrupted focus. I set up my study station in the unfinished corner of our basement. The concrete walls bled cold air even in August, and the space heater groaned more than it warmed. But it was out of the primary traffic lanes of the house. That's when the first structural anomaly occurred. My father developed a sudden, uncharacteristic interest in our nightly power consumption. Every evening, precisely at 11 p.m., I would hear the heavy thud of his footsteps descending the first flight of stairs. He would walk to the hallway console table, reach behind the framed family photo that only featured Connor, and unplug the wireless router. The green indicator lights would flash orange and then die. "We need to save electricity," he called down the basement stairs the first time he did it. "The bill is too high." It was a hollow justification. We lived in a 4-bedroom house that ran central air conditioning 24 hours a day all summer. Connor left his television and gaming console running constantly. The power draw of a single internet router was a statistical rounding error. My father didn't care about the electric bill. He cared about severing my access to online practice tests, virtual study groups, and digital prep materials. He wanted to ensure the resources required for a high score were out of my reach. He needed me to fail. He just didn't realize he was dealing with someone who audited systems for a living. I never argued with him. Arguing alerts your opponent that their blockade is effective. I simply let him unplug the router. During my afternoon shifts at the logistics firm, I used the secure employee terminals to download hundreds of practice modules, answer keys, and strategy guides. I saved them to a high-capacity encrypted thumb drive on my keychain. When the router went dark at 11 p.m., I plugged the drive into my laptop and worked offline until 2 in the morning, wrapped in a wool blanket against the basement chill. My family's campaign to keep me small was relentless. But for a long time I misread the motive. I cataloged their behavior as standard favoritism. I assumed they wanted Connor to shine, and my dimness was just a necessary contrast. I didn't understand the sheer, calculating desperation behind their actions until a Tuesday evening in late November. The early action deadline for my top 3 university choices was approaching. I had spent weeks refining my personal essays, inputting my transcript data, and formatting my extracurriculars on the Common App portal. These were out-of-state schools, top-tier universities that offered a one-way ticket out of South Dakota, and away from the Mason family dynamic. I sat at my desk in the basement, opened my browser and navigated to the login page. I typed my email address. I typed my password, a complex alphanumeric string I had memorized. I hit enter, the screen flashed red, the text read, "Access denied, invalid credentials." I tried again, same result, my heart started to pound. I tried the forgot password link. The recovery email was not mine, it was my mother's. My parents had changed my Common App password and locked me out. They were actively sabotaging my college applications. This wasn't just about keeping me small. This was about outright preventing my escape. The next morning, I confronted them. My father sat me down in the living room, a folded document on the coffee table between us. It was a pre-written confession, stating I had cheated on the SAT and forged my transcript. If I signed it, they promised to allow me to graduate high school. If I refused, they would report me to the school board and the college board, ensuring my academic record was permanently tainted. My father explained that if I signed, they would also graciously pay for my tuition at a local community college. The document, he said, was a family agreement to protect Connor's future. Connor's future, that was the key. My grandfather's will had established an educational trust. It was designed to provide a substantial scholarship to any grandchild who achieved a specific academic benchmark, specifically a 1400 or higher on the SAT, and gained admission to a 4-year university. The trust stipulated that if no grandchild met the criteria by their 19th birthday, the entire fund would default to Connor, regardless of his academic performance as the eldest grandchild. Connor's 19th birthday was in 3 weeks. My perfect 1600, my acceptance to a top university, it all threatened their plan. They needed me so Connor could inherit trust fund by default. I looked at the confession, then at my father's expectant face. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I would break. But my grandfather's words echoed in my mind. Trust the systems. The numbers are the bones. My parents were trying to manipulate the system, but I knew how to audit. I went to work that day, but not to audit shipping manifests. I went to audit my family. I logged into my secure employee terminal and opened my banking portal. My grandfather had set up a custodial savings account for me, accessible only by me and the trust's fiduciary, Harrison Pierce. I scrolled through the transaction ledger. There it was, a $5 wire transfer from my custodial account to Tolan Academic Solutions. The date coincided perfectly with Connor's AT schedule. My parents had paid a private proctor to take Connor's seat for him, using money. That $13.50 wasn't his. It was bought. I knew what I had to do. I composed an email to Harrison Pierce, the senior partner at a regional corporate law firm and the fiduciary of my grandfather's trust. He was a man who valued verifiable facts over emotional displays. The perfect audience for an audit. I didn't begin with a polite greeting. I didn't accuse my parents of hating me. Fiduciaries don't care about domestic disputes. They care about liability, compliance, and asset protection. Mr. Pierce, I typed. I am writing to formally request an immediate freeze on all disbursements related to the Arthur Mason Educational Trust. I minimized the browser, walked to the industrial scanner, and pulled the folded extortion document from my jacket. I smoothed the creases, scanned it, and attached the resulting PDF. Attachment A is a fraudulent legal document my parents drafted. They are attempting to coerce my signature under the threat of sabotaging my high school graduation. The intent of this document is to manipulate the trust parameters and secure a default payout for my brother, Connor Mason. Then, I attached the transaction ledger. Attachment B details a financial transaction executed by David Mason. The ledger indicates a payment made to a private proctor originating from my personal custodial savings. This suggests Connor Mason's current academic standing was purchased, thereby invalidating his eligibility for the trust. I finished with a single actionable request. I asked Mr. Pierce to withhold any final decisions regarding the estate pending a live, independent verification of my academic standing. I entered my secure hidden email address into the blind copy field to ensure I maintained an undisputed digital record. I hovered the cursor over the send button. This was the point of no return. Toxic households function like closed ecosystems. They rely on the assumption that you will prioritize the illusion of peace over your own survival. They bank on your silence. By clicking send, I was forcibly dragging the conflict out of our isolated dining room and placing it under the harsh, fluorescent lights of a legal arena. In a corporate lawyer's office, my father's intimidating tone held zero currency. My mother's manufactured sympathy could not alter a bank routing number. Psychological manipulation is powerless against a subpoena. I clicked send. The message vanished into the encrypted server. I logged out, packed my backpack, and walked out into the freezing South Dakota afternoon. When I walked through the front door of my house hours later, the atmosphere was thick with unresolved tension. My parents were in the den, watching a muted television. My father glanced at my jacket pockets, his eyes searching for the signed-in confession. He expected me to walk in, hand him the folded paper, and accept my defeat. He thought the weight of his ultimatum had crushed my resolve. I walked past the den without speaking, headed straight for the basement stairs. "Ellie," my father called out, his tone sharp, carrying an edge of impatience. "We need to finalize our discussion tonight." I paused on the landing, my hand on the wooden railing. "I will give you my answer by the end of the weekend," I replied, my voice level. I didn't look back. I descended the steps into the cool, damp air of my room. I sat on my narrow mattress and looked at the bare concrete walls. For the first time in 18 years, the basement didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a bunker. I went to sleep that night with a profound, steady calm. My heart rate was slow and rhythmic. I didn't toss and turn. The trap was set, buried deep in the inbox of an estate lawyer, who possessed the authority to freeze their bank accounts and demand a forensic accounting of their assets. I had handed over the blueprints of their fraud. All I had to do now was wait. I just needed my father to take one final arrogant step forward and trigger the snare. The next morning arrived with a pale, overcast sky. The silence in the house was strained. By Friday afternoon, the grace period my father had granted me expired in his mind. He was a man accustomed to immediate obedience from his employees and his family. The delay was making him impatient. He called me upstairs. "Ellie, I've been more than patient. Where's the signed document?" I walked into the kitchen, my face neutral. "I decided not to sign it, Father." His face went slack, then red. "You little fool. You think you can defy me? You think you can just walk away from this?" "I think I already have," I replied. "I've already secured my future. And I've secured Connor's too," he scoffed. "What are you talking about? Your future is gone. And Connor's trust fund is secure because you're a failure." "No," I said. "Connor's trust fund is not secure because his academic standing was purchased, and I have the receipts to prove it." I watched his face. The color drained from it. He knew. He knew I had audited them. Just then, the doorbell rang. My mother, who had been listening from the living room, went to answer it. Standing on our porch was Harrison Pierce, flanked by two other men in dark suits. My father's jaw dropped. He looked at me, then at the shattered ceramic coffee cup still staining the hardwood floor from his earlier outburst. The truth had finally cornered him. "Mr. Pierce spoke in a calm, authoritative voice. "Mr. and Mrs. Mason, we're here regarding the Arthur Mason Educational Trust. We have received some concerning information that requires an immediate, independent verification of all beneficiaries' academic records and a full forensic accounting of the trust's disbursements." He held up a document. "This is a temporary injunction, freezing all assets related to the trust until our investigation is complete." My mother started to cry, a performative wail she usually reserved for funerals. My father, however, was silent, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Connor, who had just walked in, looked utterly bewildered. His entire future, the one built on lies and my parents' manipulation, was crumbling before his eyes. That day, the truth, as my grandfather promised, did the heavy lifting. My parents' carefully constructed facade shattered. The investigation revealed the full extent of their fraud. The payment to the proctor, the attempt to coerce my confession, and their scheme to secure the trust fund for Connor. The trust fund was ultimately dissolved, its assets distributed to various educational charities, as per a contingency clause my grandfather had wisely included for cases of fraud. My college applications, which they had sabotaged, were reinstated thanks to Mr. Pierce's intervention and my perfect SAT score. I received full scholarships to several top universities and chose one far, far away from South Dakota. I left the Mason household with a single duffel bag, leaving behind the silence, the resentment, and the cold, damp basement that had once been my cage. Looking back, my story is a testament to the power of objective truth. My parents, in their desperation and insecurity, tried to build a future for Connor on a foundation of sand. They taught him that character didn't matter, as long as you could forge the paperwork. When the tide of objective reality finally rolled in, he was left with nothing. No skills, no genuine self-esteem, and no moral compass. And then there's me, Ellie, the scapegoat. The invisible girl relegated to a freezing basement, forced to treat her own home like a hostile occupied territory. The primary function of a traditional family structure is to provide a sanctuary, a place where a child doesn't have to wear armor, where their natural talents are nurtured rather than perceived as a threat. The Masons violated this contract entirely. My brilliance disrupted the fragile, manufactured narrative my parents relied upon to survive their own financial and social insecurities. It's inspiring to witness a young woman utilize cold, systemic logic to outmaneuver her abusers. Her triumph is undeniably satisfying. But we must also acknowledge the heartbreaking reality that a teenager had to become a machine to survive the people who were supposed to cherish her. I had to learn how to audit my own parents. I had to learn how to compartmentalize my pain, masking my emotions to protect my future. A child should never have to encrypt their dreams to keep their mother from erasing them. A daughter should never have to record the metadata of a father's extortion attempt just to secure her right to an education. True parenting requires an emotional awareness that transcends ego. It demands fairness. It requires adults to look at their children and see them exactly as they are, honoring their unique trajectories, even if those paths don't align with the parent's specific desires or financial conveniences. Honesty isn't just about telling the truth. It's about living in truth. The Masons lived in a fabricated reality, sustained only by systemic deceit and the suppression of the one person in their bloodline who possessed genuine merit. Arthur Mason, my grandfather, understood this. He recognized the rot spreading through the roots of his family tree. His trust fund wasn't merely a financial gift. It was a mechanism of pure, unfiltered accountability. He knew that math doesn't lie, even when the people you love do. He reached past the grave to provide the guidance and fairness his son was incapable of delivering. He forced the truth into the light, demanding that integrity be the only acceptable currency for reward. Stories like mine resonate because they tap into a universal fear. The fear that the people designated to protect us might secretly be plotting against us. They remind us that the titles of mother and father must be earned through consistent, honorable action, not just claimed by biological default. If you have ever felt like an anomaly in your own home, if you have ever had to build a fortress of quiet competence to protect your worth from the people trying to diminish it, you know exactly how cold that basement feels. We tell these stories because the truth, no matter how deeply it is buried, always eventually finds the surface. When the dust settled and the lawyers left, what remained of a family built on illusions? Imagine that Rapid City house the day after I walked out the door with my duffel bag. The 82-degree heat has dissipated. The broken ceramic has been swept from the oak floorboards, but the stain of the spilled coffee remains in the grout, a dark, permanent reminder of the moment the fiction shattered. David, Brenda, and Connor were left sitting in the quiet ruins of a home they hollowed out themselves. They had no one left to blame, no one left to hide behind, and no one left to steal from. We are all architects of the families we cultivate. Every choice we make, every truth we honor, and every lie we tolerate lays another brick in the foundation of the lives our children will inherit. Look around your own living room. What kind of structure are you building? And more importantly, when the auditor finally arrives at your door to measure the weight of your choices, will your foundation hold the truth, or will it shatter upon impact?